Hey class, today what we're going to do is look at some exponent rules and how to simplify um, some expressions using that involve exponents with negative exponents, maybe it's raised to the zero power, and just simplifying rational expressions using our properties of exponents. So there's three properties that we need to memorize. They're all pretty easy. So let's say if I have a to the fifth power, that's going to be a times a times a times a times a. So whatever the number is up in the exponent, that's going to be how many times we multiply by itself. So if it was like 6 to the fifth power, that'd be 6 times 6 times 6 times 6 times 6. Or whatever the base of our exponent is. The a would be our base, and then the 5 is our power or exponent. Whenever we have a negative exponent, what that does is it pretty much just moves that whole thing to our denominator, and then it makes our exponent positive. So whenever we want to simplify, we want to simplify it with a positive exponent. And the last thing is if you raise anything to the zero power, it's going to be equal to 0. So I know this sounds like a weird rule. You're just going to have to memorize it. But if you raise anything to the zero power, it's going to be equal to 1. So what we want to do is use these three properties in order to simplify this. So first thing is you see that we have a negative exponent. So if we have a negative exponent, we're going to use this rule, and what that means is this whole thing is going to then move into our denominator. So the 5 is not affected by the exponent. So remember your order of operations, you do exponents first. So we're going to deal with the exponent on the x first, and then we multiply. So it's a 5 times x, and then raised to the negative 4. We do the exponent first before we do the multiplication. So we move that down. So that's going to be 5 over x to the 4th. So remember, whenever we move it down, it becomes positive, just like we have in our rule up here, and then we have times y to the 3rd. Now if you notice, there's no x. There's nothing else we can simplify. There's no 5 down here that we can divide out the 5s, or there's no x's or y's that we can divide out. So this is it completely simplified. We've got it down to its positive exponents, and that would be that for that example. We've got 4 more examples we're going to work through. They're going to get progressively harder. So remember our rules. If you have anything like y to the second power, that's going to be the same as y times y. So first thing we want to do is kind of deal with this x to the negative 3. I would always deal with the negative exponents first. So what that's going to do is move it down here. So what I'm going to have is 4y, because the 4 is not affected, the y is not affected, so those move down. And I've still got a 2 and x, and then I've got an x to the 3rd down here now, and I've got y squared. Okay, so now what we're going to do is deal with all of this. So I'm going to list it out all as our, so I got 4 times y, and now I've got 2, I've got an x. Now I have 3 x's here, so that's times x times x times x, and then times y times y. Now one of the things that's cool about this is now we have a y divided by y, and if you think about y divided by y, it's equal to 1. 1 times anything is itself, so if I divide this out, these pretty much cancel out, and I'm left with, that becomes a 1, and so like 4 times 1 is 4, so that stays the same. The other part we have to deal with is this is 4 divided by 2. If you think of 4 divided by 2, that's going to be 2, and it's going to stay up here. So we're going to have 2 up there, and then that got canceled out with that, so then we're left with that 2 disappeared because we did 4 divided by 2, so that's gone. That became a 2. So we've got 2 up there. I've got 4 x's, so I'm going to say x to the 4th, and then I've got 1y. And so that's what that would simplify to. So I got 2 over x to the 4th times y. Alright, for this one I got a lot of negatives, so I'm going to deal with this. So this is 2 to the negative 1, so that moves down. I know that that's going to move up, and this is also going to move up. So I will rewrite this. I've got my x to the 1, so that moved up. Still got x to the 7th. I've got y, and I got y to the 5th, all over my 2 that I moved down. So that was just moving my negative exponents where they need to go based on my rule that I have earlier. Now that I have all this, I have x to the 1, so I just listed once. I have x to the 7th, so I'm going to list that out 7 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, times my y, and then times my y, times y, times y, times y, times y. All of that is divided by 2. And now I just re-simplify. I don't have anything to divide out. So I count all my x's. I got 8 of them. Count all my y's. I got 6 of them. And then I divide it by 2. So those are my 2 simplified forms of that equation. So I got 2 more examples. These start to get a little bit more difficult. Now we're involving parentheses. So whenever you have a parentheses, that means the exponent goes to both of everything that's inside of it. Whereas before, if I just had an exponent, like for instance, if I had a 2 out here, the 7 would only go to the x, it does not go to the 2. Alright, so what this becomes is, if I list that out, that's going to be 6x, and I'm going to have y to the negative 3 times y to the negative 3, because it's squared, so that means I'm multiplying it by itself twice. And then that's all going to be divided by x to the 7th. Now what I want to do, move my stuff down, so I got 6x. I'm going to go ahead and multiply out my x's, save myself some time. So I got 7 of those, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I got y to the 3rd. And then I got another y to the 3rd. Alright, so then I divide out what I can. I got x's on both sides, so I divide those out. That becomes a 1. I've got a 6 left in my numerator. And then down here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 x's. So x to the 6th. And I've got 6 y's. And so I've got 6x to the 6th. 6 divided by x to the 6th, y to the 6th. So that one is that, simplified. And then here, remember our one rule is if anything is raised to the 0 power, it becomes a 1. So everything inside the parentheses just becomes a 1. So it's 1 divided by this. I've got a negative 5 in my denominator, so that's going to move up. So I've got x to the 5th over 2y to the 3rd. I don't have any x's or y's. I don't have x's in my denominator, in both my numerator and denominator, or y's in my numerator and denominator, so I don't have to divide anything out, so that's it, completely simplified. And so that is simplifying exponents.